Good Monitoring in Action, a real-life example. I'm Steve Santiago, a technical content writer at Uptrends, and I'll be your monitor today. I will be joined by Chris Bennett, Head of Managed Services at ITRS Group, my colleague Steph Hagen, who is a support engineer at Uptrends, and Daniel Sullivan, Senior Application Support Analyst at Allpay, leading payment platform in the UK. Daniel's been nice enough to have a chat with us today about how they use monitoring as part of their overall monitoring strategy. But now I'd like to pass it over to Chris, put it in his hands. And we are having a little bit of technical issues with his camera, but we're working on resolving those. So Chris.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, done a few of these Bright Talk ones now, and my camera's been fine, but never mind, we can go. So the agenda today, as Steve said, would be I'm going to take you through what makes a good monitoring strategy, and then we're going to jump into that real-life example with Daniel. So what makes a good monitoring strategy? Well, the first thing you need to ask is, what do you expect from a good monitoring strategy? And you expect a lot. You expect monitoring maturity, getting the best, using the best features and functions that you get from the product in order to give you good monitoring tool value. And then with that monitoring tool value, that's when you get your production stability, which is why we're all here. There's no point in having a monitoring tool where you're only using half of the features or you're getting bad data from it. And that's where you get that value and production stability. And when you have that production stability, that's when you're getting your real business value, where you're working on your mean time to issue resolution and understanding. You also will need your monitor to keep up. Your applications, your business world is always changing. There's always new products, new clients, new applications, going from data centers to the cloud, always changes that need to, well, your monitoring needs to keep up. So, it's always evolving. And you want it for the least expenditure and the most ROI. So quite a lot. So how do you achieve this? Well, you need a good monitoring strategy. So what does that look like? Well, we'll start off by saying what a poor monitoring strategy looks like. So if you imagine our matrix here, we've got our levels of monitoring on the left, the ones that are most applicable to you. And on the going across the top, you've got your multiple business units and app teams. And so there's three classic examples of a poor monitoring strategy. One is assumptive monitoring, where everybody's striving for observability. Well, observability is brilliant, but it's only part of the solution. You will never have complete observability from the data. You need to go and check things yourself, which is where synthetic monitoring comes in. So an over-reliance on observability means you miss out on that level 3 information. Another one is where you're assuming what is required for level 4 monitoring. The amount of times we have an application team say, we know what the service management want to monitor. The result is when we go and talk to the service management team, they tell us, we were given this dashboard, but we don't use it. Another example is poor tool value monitoring. There's a strategic tool that's been rolled out and given to everybody, and then there's a tool that people actually want to use. So they end up with two tools. Why have you got this other tool? We were given this, but we don't use it. Poor value. And then the third classic example we see is siloed monitoring, especially when you're getting into that business activity monitoring. You want data from multiple business units. Well, you typically don't get it because the excuse here, or the reason is, we don't have access to the other team's data or the other business unit's data. They implemented their monitoring completely different to us, so mapping the two together is a nightmare. But this is not what you want. So let's imagine you fixed all of that. You have the right tools doing the right job. You still might have multiple tools monitoring the same app, because not one tool can do everything, but this time they're all doing the bits they're supposed to be doing. But that's still not really what you want, because all you've got here is a bunch of individuals with the torchlights seeing what they want in front of them. What you really want is for everybody to have visibility around them, having that context information, not just the stuff in front of them. So you need to change those torches into a street light effect, where everybody has access to whatever is available. That's not to say that they're using everything, because that's where you have too much monitoring. but it's all in context to their needs. And a real life example would be here, where you have multi-teams, multi-tools, multi-solutions, but it all's working seamlessly together and all interacting with each other and interacting into your external systems like analytical tools and event management. Knowing what's around you and what you need, that working seamlessly together, multi-tool environment, that is an example of a good monitoring strategy. So, and I've mentioned this a few times now, adapting a multi-tool approach is key. And part of that tool set could be to keep track of your website, your applications, or your website performance, especially when working in like an always on environment such as financial services and payments. So that's what we're going to be talking about now. Steve and Stefan will talk to Daniel to give you a real life example of what application and transaction monitoring looks like for a payment solution provider.
Thanks, Chris. That was a very informative overview. At this time, I'd like to officially introduce Daniel Sullivan, Senior Application Analyst at Allpay. As I mentioned earlier, Allpay are a leading UK-based payments platform, and they've been operating in the UK since 1994. So welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Great. Okay, thank you once again for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking you, when did you start using Uptrends monitoring at Allpay, and what are your main use cases for it?
So we started using Uptrends around the start of 2018. Uptrends was chosen as our monitoring tool as it allows us to monitor our websites from multiple locations in the UK and around the world. This allows us to identify if any issues are location-based or not. Another reason why we're using Uptrends is because it gives us an independent external view of our estate, replicating what our customers see. So our main use case is for our customers to log into our websites, and then our transaction monitors can mimic this with the transaction monitors. So it logs in, carries out a test payment, and then will log out. And then the Uptrends monitors will monitor most visited mission critical pages for uptime and performance. And Uptrends is the best tool for us to use.
Got it. You earlier, due to the nature of your business, we know that Allpay needs to monitor different payment platform and portals. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit and tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go into a bit more info about what we do as a business. So Allpay is a fintech here in the UK. We process around £8.5 billion worth of payments for around 4.5 million customers. Most of our payments are for bill payment transactions for customers of entities such as housing associations and local authorities. We also have a prepaid solution which allows local councils and other companies to pay out benefits and allowance to their end customers. And finally, we also manufacture Visa and MasterCards for several customers. So, for example, some of the cards we produced in the past are for leading challenger banks like Monzo, Revolut, and Starling Bank. So because of this, Allpay has multiple platform websites hosted by ourselves and our third-party partners. So being able to collate all of the website monitoring into one tool, of which Uptrends does for us, reduces the amount of time we have to spend locating different alerts, and it allows us to do other stuff because it's saving us time. So some of the portals that we monitor, for example, are for our All Payments and our Corpay websites.
Great. Daniel, I was wondering also if you could talk to me a bit about where does transaction monitoring enter into that picture? Is that something that you could expand a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. So the vast majority of our customers and clients using our websites are accessing our payments facility websites. The transaction monitors allow us to mimic what our clients and customers do to make or take a payment. They're a lot more beneficial to us rather than a single page monitor. So it allows us to monitor the customer journey with alerting set up so it notifies us on the exact stage of the process that isn't working as expected, instead of a single page monitor, which obviously only monitors a single page.
Steph, do you have a follow-up for Daniel?
Yeah, I do. So Daniel, on this in this screenshot, we're seeing a transaction dashboard for Allpay called Login, Take Payment, Search, and Log Out.
Yeah.
And for the next slide, a similar dashboard also for a transaction for all payments that I'm assuming does a similar thing, right? So logging in, executing some payment-related action, and then logging out again. Could you speak a little bit about that use case? Is that something that is very critical to you, and do you monitor all of that in transactions?
Yeah, so the core pay one is payments that our clients take via the phones, and then our all payments ones are which our customers would just do by themselves. So these two websites are our main two revenue earners, I would say. So yeah, being able to have these transaction monitors set up for these, so we know how long each step's taken, and then if we know we see anything exceeding the test performance limits, we get alerted by that, and then we can investigate what the issue is and fix any issues that we have.
Okay, that sounds great. Steve.
Sure. As a payment solutions provider, what are the most important elements of your monitoring strategy at Allpay? So, for example, what steps are you taking to minimize the amount of downtime that occurs?
So Uptrends allows us to constantly check our customer-facing websites for uptime and performance. Allpay wants to have a proactive approach to preventing outages and payment errors, so we're aware of any issues before it becomes apparent to our customers and our clients. So any issues with payment platforms creates a massive problem for our call center here that we have here. It makes the customer journey of our websites a really negative one, and at the end of the day, that will lead to lost revenue, which any company doesn't want to have.
Steph?
Yeah, so when you speak about beating customers to the problem, I'm assuming that you have some sort of alerting set up, right, to notify the proper teams within Allpay if something does go down. Could you speak a little bit about your alerting setup?
Yeah, so when something is wrong, something goes wrong with it's detected by a monitor. So an alert is sent out by email. So how we've set it up, we've set up alerts so that emails are sent to the most responsible department. So for example, we've got our VPN solution has a monitor set up in on Uptrends, and anything goes wrong with this, an alert set up to our infrastructure and networks departments. All alerts are sent to our service management ticketing system for auditing purposes as well. So receiving these alerts allows us to investigate and fix these issues before they become apparent to our customers and clients.
That's great. So alerting over multiple channels.
Yeah.
So in your account, we can see that you also do some performance monitoring. And in this example screenshot here, we see a graph in the top left, performance over time for all monitors. And there is a notable jump over the past couple of hours.
Yeah.
Would this type of thing, speaking of being proactive, would this type of thing also be a call to action for your teams? Or
Yes, so our infrastructure manager and department will notice these spikes, and they investigate any issues. Most of the time, they're generally there for just normal increased traffic during our peak hours during the day. But our infrastructure department will investigate these.
all right, that makes sense. And then there are dashboards like these, application support TV dashboard, which makes me assume that you would have this on a monitor somewhere in the office. Could you talk a little bit about that? Who looks at this, or who does anything with this, or why?
So sure, yeah, it's set up by my team in the application support department, but anybody in our open plan office can see this. So it's really, you can see any errors straight away. So as you can see, there's one that's red at the moment. So that will also send an alert as well. So it's just really grabs the attention of anyone who's walking past or anyone in our department to notice if anything goes wrong. You can also so you can see the graphs on the right as well. That shows how long those transaction monitors are taking, and you can see if there's any spikes at any specific times.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Steve?
Yes, Daniel, you talked about a little bit about how your team is setting up transaction monitoring. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about more on the process and perhaps maybe talk about are you using certain specific tools such as the transaction recorder or something else that helps with your organization and setting up your monitoring?
Yes, sure. So we've created all of our transaction monitors using the really easy tool provided by Uptrends called the Transaction Monitor. It's a Chrome plugin which records each step of the transaction you're trying to make. It's pretty much basically if you ever used the record macro feature in Excel. So you go to each page to page what you're trying to create, and this plugin will record it for you. So once you've completed the recording, you can either test it yourself, or generally what we do here at Allpay is you can get the Uptrends support team to test your recording for you and iron out any issues that they have with it. We normally do this because it saves us a lot of time. We can go on to do other tasks, and the turnaround times normally are around 20, well, it's less than 24 hours. So we can get it live within a day. So it really helps us there.
Okay. Steph, do you have a follow-up for Daniel?
Yeah, maybe as an illustration, an example of a recorded transaction is what you would see here. So this is, I would say, a typical transaction flow for Allpay, but also just in general, a very typical use case where in step 1, you'll see in the top left, we navigate to a website, followed by step 2, and this would all be recorded in the browser as Daniel described. Step 2 fills in a username and a password and clicks a login button. And then from there, step 3 fills out a form and then attempts to actually execute some interaction. In this case, this would be payment, I'm assuming. And this will allow customers like Allpay to test exactly which parts of their website are still working. And in case something doesn't, it'll alert them exactly what goes wrong. So this will be a very typical use case: log in, perform an action, and then after this will be followed by a log out step. Steve?
Sure, thanks. I'd like to talk about data collection. So, Daniel, I would imagine that through transaction monitoring, you're collecting huge amounts of data that possibly can be useful. Are you finding any of that data that you're collecting able to support Allpay's business objectives? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. So to be viewed as a reliable payment service, Allpay can't afford to have any major outages or any faulty transaction systems, especially when our users are depending on the service to be working all of the time. Late payments need to be avoided, and especially, for example, when it's a customer's rent's due. So Uptrends monitoring allows us Allpay to reduce the amount of downtime our website experiences, allowing us to grow some of our company's objectives, such as providing a positive user experience for our clients and customers. The reduction in downtime also allows us to adhere to any SLAs we have with our clients and the OLAs set within our internal departments here. And it also ensures that we adhere to any key performance indicators and that they're reached each month. So we receive monthly reports via email that collates all this data, and we can send this data off to our clients in their monthly information packs. And it's also collated by our managers as well to review and see if we any areas that we need to improve on.
Sure, and downtime is huge, especially in e-commerce right now as it grows. Stephanie, follow-up?
Yeah, so just to verify, you have these dashboards that collate SLA data for you, and this gets sent in reports to managers, and then action gets taken, presumably, right?
Yes, so yeah, the managers collect all of this data together, and they put it into their packs that we send off to our clients so that they can view what's been hit and missed, basically.
Right, that makes sense. Steve?
You know, Daniel, I think of especially the industry that you're in with payments and fintech and finance, and I sort of put myself in the shoes of the end user. And you know, there's a lot of talk about the end user experience especially when it comes to e-commerce. And I find that really intriguing. I find that expectations customers have of providers, you know, regarding availability and accuracy, it seems that the bar is set much higher than other types of businesses. So
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could name any occurrences when, you know, monitoring helped you resolve problems before they became, you know, issues affecting large amounts of your customers, you know, who were impacted.
Yeah, so I think it was around March or April last year, one of our payment portals went down overnight. So because we had our monitor set up for this, it alerted our out of hours infrastructure support team. They were able to investigate the issue due to what error was being given in the monitor. So they investigated the issue, they fixed the issue, and they was able to get everything working again before the portal was really used during office hours. So yeah, that's saved a lot of effort when we came back into work the next day.
Can imagine that taking the proactive approach.
Definitely.
So I want to thank you, Daniel, for participating in the webinar today. You provided some really interesting insights on how you're using monitoring at Allpay and how it supports your business objectives. At this point, we have a few minutes to answer questions from the audience, so feel free to drop them in the question box below, and we will field those as we get them.
Yeah, so speaking of questions, we do have a couple questions coming in. So I suppose I'll just get started on those. First question, have you been able to take any steps to prevent future errors in payments and transactions based on what you learned using transaction monitoring? Daniel, I suppose that's a question for you.
Yeah, so we've actually had to make changes to code that's been done by our development teams. And also we've had to inform some of our third-party providers that they've had issues, and they've had to change some of their code as well to prevent future occurrences. We've created some more internal monitors and alerting tools, and such as in SCOM. And then we've also tweaked our existing monitors to adjust any thresholds to reduce the amount of alerting, I suppose. And then finally, we've also added additional steps to monitors to enhance the check-ins that they do as well.
Right. So using such monitoring, you encountered, say, bottlenecks or slow steps and changed code, or
Yep.
found a third party wasn't performing optimally or performing at all, and were able to inform. Okay, that's great. Oh, let's see. Second question. Are you able to track what your users are doing and seeing when connecting to Allpay? So that would be for you again, Daniel.
Yeah, so we use a real-time monitoring tool. This checks how many users are connecting to our websites. So real-time monitoring allows us to monitor the average load time of our pages, how many views pages receive, and lots of other useful information, which is fed back to our development and infrastructure teams to understand what are our pinch points on our most visited pages, which allow us to focus on these for future development and enhancements.
All right, great. So to cross-reference peak hours and increased total time metrics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Let's see. What would you say are the biggest benefits of transaction monitoring overall? I'm going to throw that to you as well, Daniel, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So like I said previously, really, basically you can mimic exactly what a customer would do. We've got it set up so it's done from different checkpoints in the UK and around the world. So it will alert us if there's an issue in one place or another. And it's also like super easy to make using the transaction recorder as well with the plugin. And anyone can do it. You don't have to have any IT experience to create them. It's really easy to do.
That's actually great. That leads really neatly into our next question, which is how long did it take to configure the tool for payments monitoring? So I'm assuming we looked at some examples, right, in your account of a couple of monitors, but I'm assuming your total monitoring setup is quite extensive.
Yes. I think it's been growing over the years, to be honest, but the actual time that it takes is really not that much at all. I would say 15 minutes for each monitor, I would say. It really doesn't take that much time at all.
Right.
I think that's to jump in here as well. It's a good point what you said, Daniel, about how long it's evolved, though. A lot of people quite often do ask how long does it take to configure a monitoring tool. It's continuous. You're always configuring a monitoring tool because, like we showed in those first slides, your environment is continually changing. The business that you're doing is continually changing. So yeah, it's a continuous part of an app support role is to configure monitoring.
Right, that makes sense. So for an individual monitor, it doesn't take long at all, but for the complete monitoring setup, this just keeps changing and doesn't ever really finish.
Yeah, it's an ever-evolving process, really. When there's updates to the portals, we tweak the monitors so that it can understand the new updates that have been given. So yeah, it's a really good tool. So yeah, for whenever you need to edit one of the transaction monitors as well, it's really simple to do.
Right, great. let's see, we have another question that came in. What is the workaround if the website has a Captcha module enabled when recording the web session? Is that possible? I guess this is a question for me as a support engineer at Uptrends and working with transactions a lot. So Captchas are typically designed to stop specifically what we do with the automated running of step through a website. It's very difficult on our end to circumvent those. However, most Captcha solutions offer some sort of whitelisting or workaround where we can say, hey, if we include this particular request header, don't serve a Captcha, or if the request comes from this particular IP address, don't serve a Captcha. So on our end, it's very difficult to block, but very, very commonly, this will be something you can take care of on the Captcha end of things. All right. And then as it stands, we have no further outstanding questions.
Okay, well, it seems like, as you mentioned, there's no other questions. We reached our time for the day. I'd like to thank Chris, Daniel, and Stefan for joining me today, and everyone who's attended. I hope you found the information in this webinar very useful. And we just say take care and hope we see you again on our next webinar. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.